Parallels. Worf is promoted to first officer after killing Geordi, which causes Riker to kill himself.
I mean, people are going to be confused by that, but okay.
Then they'll be like, man, I'm so intrigued, I gotta watch this episode.
Or these guys don't know what they're talking about, I'm going to click off. Worf gives us a log saying he's coming back from a bat'leth competition where several competitors were maimed, and it's too bad that they didn't make that an episode.
He won the tournament and is fondling his trophy, which looks like a Metroid power-up.
In the hall, Riker tells Worf about how the Argus array has stopped relaying data, so they're going to check it out, but Worf is not listening.
Riker asks what's going on, and Worf admits it is his birthday.
And he's worrying that they'll be staging a surprise party. Riker assures him that this isn't the case, but when he walks into the next room, they launch their attack.
With space poppers and space cake and space balloons.
And Klingon for he's a jolly good fellow.
Worf is annoyed about the whole thing, and Beverly tells him to cut the cake. And I really like the side character audio when he does. He's cutting a cake. It's the simple act of cutting a cake. And there are two people who have apparently never seen something so exciting in their life.
And judging by the look in Worf's eyes when Beverly gives him the knife, the episode could easily have gone in a very different direction. Data gives Worf a painting of a battle, which Troy and Riker hang on his wall despite his protestations.
And a way cooler looking shield already on the wall in that spot.
Then Geordi walks in and Worf says he feels dizzy.
Worf is handed some cake, but he's confused because he claims it was chocolate before, which Troy dismisses before giving him Alexander's gift, which is a cast of his forehead.
I wish my kid would give me a cast of his forehead as a gift. It'd be a lot better than what I usually get, which is nothing. Worf thanks Troy for watching Alexander while he was on shore leave, and then Picard asks Worf how old he is, and Worf is surprised because someone had said earlier that Picard couldn't attend.
The ship reaches the Argus array, and Data says everything is working fine, but the data is being intercepted, and he only has a general idea of where it's being sent. So Riker says they should download the data the array has been gathering to see what's going on.
Worf goes to 10 Forward to talk to Troy, and he tells her he's worried about how Alexander is developing and requests that Troy become his surrogate mother in case anything happens to him.
Bringing up the episode Ethics, where he was going to die, and it asked Troy to take care of Alexander. Troy asks what that would make the two of them, and Worf equates it to step-siblings, and is taken aback when Troy states that would make Loxana his stepmother.
It is a risk I am willing to take.
I accept.
Worf is called to engineering, where Data and Geordi explain to him and Picard that the array was observing Federation starship development sites. Data shows them footage of a Cardassian ship approaching the array right before it was tampered with.
Picard tells Worf to investigate the area for the ship, when Worf again gets dizzy and almost passes out, and when he opens his eyes, Picard is gone, and Data and Geordi have swapped spots, so he goes to sickbay to get checked out.
And Beverly says he's probably experiencing side effects from his concussion, but he says he didn't have a concussion. Beverly tells him that he got hit in the head during the bat'leth tournament and lost, but he says he won the tournament and goes to grab his trophy to prove it, but he finds that it says 9th place. In other words, a loser.
So he brings up the personal log he made on his way back to the ship, but is equally mystified to find that it too tells the same story about getting 9th place.
But Beverly tells him not to worry, his memories will return, he'll remember just how much of a loser he is, and she says just let her know if he feels dizzy again.
When he returns to the bridge, Data asks if he completed the scan of the array, which Worf can't remember being asked to do, and then a Cardassian ship suddenly arrives.
The Cardassian asks why they are so close to the Cardassian border, and Picard says they are repairing a subspace telescope.
The Cardassian is suspicious and implies that they're using it to spy on Cardassians, and Picard tells him to f*** off.
And after the call ends, Worf says the ship matches the one that reconfigured the array, but no one knows what he's talking about.
Worf says the logs can back him up, but Data says they never downloaded any logs.
Worf talks to Troy in his quarters and tells her that he still feels that the version of things he remembers is correct. Then Geordi walks in and says they checked out the logs from earlier and didn't find any evidence of Cardassian involvement.
Worf gets dizzy again, and when he opens his eyes, his painting has shifted locations, then it changes to a completely different painting, and then Troy's outfit also changes.
Then he suddenly finds himself on the bridge with the Cardassian ship attacking. He finds that the control panel has changed and he doesn't know how to raise the shields.
And Riker shoves him out of the way and takes over, but the Cardassians manage to destroy the array. After assessing the damage to the ship, Picard asks Worf what happened, and he claims another memory loss and asks for a temporary leave of duty.
And we also hear that Geordi was injured and is going to sickbay with plasma burns. Worf looks guilty about that, and I wonder if that would have been the case if it hadn't been a major cast member that was injured. In his quarters, Worf looks around at all the things that have changed, but I was relieved to see that that weird chair was still there, so at least the important stuff didn't change.
He finds some flowers on the table and tries to bring up his personal log again, but now it says he never went to the tournament at all.
Troi visits and acts really weird and overly informal, and when Worf finally asks if there's anything he can do for her, she goes into the bedroom, and Worf leans over to look in a really goofy way.
It reminded me of Jeremy's alien mom. Troi sits on the bed and tells Worf to join her, then she starts giving him a back rub and asks why he can't even open up to his wife.
He tells her about how everything seems to be changing all the time and only he remembers it, but no one believes him. But she says she believes him, so they go to talk to Data.
Blue-eyed Data is searching for phenomena that could be causing Worf's experiences, and he can't find anything, so he asks Worf to think back to the first time he noticed things were different. Worf recalls the episode's events, and eventually determines the common element to all the shifts was that Geordi was always close by.
They go to sickbay to try to question Geordi, but they are told that he is dead. Data examines his body but finds nothing unusual, and Nurse Ogawa suggests checking his visor, so Data hooks it up to a machine.
Actually, it was Dr. Ogawa at this point.
Normally she's Nurse Ogawa. I just figured it was easier just to not put that in there.
Wow. Thank you for watching this video and our inaccuracies.
As soon as Geordi's visor is turned on, Worf feels dizzy, and he finds that Beverly has replaced Ogawa, and his uniform and rank have changed.
Data says he's detecting a quantum flux in Worf's cellular RNA, which Worf asks what that means because he's so dumb.
They meet with Riker, who is now the captain, and Data says the quantum flux means that Worf does not belong in that universe.
My next note says, let Robert explain this part.
Data makes up a bunch of shit about all the matter in the universe resonating in the same signature way at the quantum level, and Riker asks if Data means that Worf's quantum signature is different, which I would think was pretty clear by that point. Riker says they should look for any anomalies on the path that Worf remembers taking from the Batleth tournament.
And when they get there, Lieutenant Wesley detects a disturbance, and that big glass sheet thing would be very cumbersome to have to walk around that thing anytime you needed to get to either side.
Data says the disturbance is a quantum fissure in the space-time continuum. He says it can't be seen, but he can enhance it with a warp field to make it visible, and I wondered how that was supposed to work.
He also says there's an ion trail left by a shuttlecraft, presumably Worf's, and the fissure is a fixed point across the space-time continuum.
A keyhole which intersects many other quantum realities.
And I like how Beverly is sitting there pretending she understands what everyone is talking about with that little half smirk on her face.
Data brings up the theory that all things that can happen do happen, each in their own reality, and Worf's shuttle, having hit this point in the space-time continuum, had him shifting between realities, amplified by Geordi's visor,
which emits a subspace field pulse. And I know it sounds like we're making up fake science shit to make fun of the episode, but this stuff is actually what they say.
Wesley says they could scan the fissure and find the signature that matches Worf's to get him back to his own reality, which I thought could potentially take forever, since there were an infinite number of universes.
Yeah, and I wondered how they were scanning them in the first place.
They were scanning Worf's quantum molecular fissure RNA or whatever.
Yeah, and then somehow scanning alternate realities from this subspace fissure or whatever. I don't know. Worf goes back to his quarters with Troi, who says there's a good chance that her Worf wouldn't return. But why would her Worf have disappeared in the first place if he didn't interact with the quantum fissure or whatever? Shouldn't there be two Worfs here now?
I have a lot of questions about that in my wrap-up.
And Worf tells her that even though he was only friends with her in his reality, he wouldn't be opposed to a romantic relationship.
She then brings up their children, which Worf is unfamiliar with, but he notes that Alexander is not one of them. So then he reconsiders going back. Later, Wesley says he's analyzed 10 million quantum signatures, but hasn't had any luck yet, clearly not understanding the base concept of infinity.
A Bajoran ship approaches, which Riker says destroyed the array, and it fires on them, which Wesley says causes an energy surge affecting the pulse he was shooting into the fissure, which is causing it to destabilize.
Then a bunch of Enterprises start appearing, and Data says the barriers between realities are breaking down.
And it's a good thing none of the Enterprises materialized in the same space as each other. The Bajoran ship leaves,
Probably flipping the out, wondering what the hell is going on.
and Wesley tells Riker they are receiving 285,000 hails. Are all the other Enterprises only hailing them? Why wouldn't they be hailing each other? Or are they sending hails to all the ships around them at the same time? Because that wouldn't make sense either.
Data says they could find the ship that matches Worf's quantum signature and have him re-enter the fissure in his original shuttle that may be enough to seal the fissure to stop new Enterprises from breaking through. And when Riker says, well, what about the ones that are already here? Data says sealing the fissure may bump all of them back to their own reality.
And while they wait for the right ship to identify itself, Wesley says it's hard to isolate who's talking to who over all the comm traffic. So how do they know their hail was answered by the right ship then, if they're all talking to each other all the time?
They eventually find the right ship, and it sends out the shuttlecraft, and Data modifies it and tells Worf he'll need to activate the gobbledygook processor once he enters the fissure.
And says he may end up appearing several days earlier or later than he left. So if he appeared earlier, could that create a new timeline where there were two Worfs, and he tells him not to go to the Batleth competition?
And before Worf leaves, he shares a very passionate kiss with Troy. While heading towards the fissure, Worf is attacked by one of the Enterprises, and it turns out that that one came from a universe where the Federation is gone, and the Borg have taken over everything, and they don't want to go back.
So Captain Riker fires on that one and blows it up. He says it must have blown up so easily because it had already taken damage from the Borg to cover up the fact that he is a murderer in every reality.
Worf enters the fissure and initiates the Jabberwocky pulse, which results in him waking up on the floor of the shuttle.
And when he hails Picard, he finds that he is back on his way to the Enterprise from the Batleth tournament.
He asks Picard if everything is okay, and Picard says yes, so he automatically assumes things are back to normal, even though Picard saying things are fine is no indication that things are actually fine.
He tells Riker about the fissure incident,
who seems super chill about the whole thing, and Worf says that by going back through the fissure, it was sealed and poses no further issue, even though they're just guessing, just like they've been guessing about everything else in this episode.
He stops outside his door and tells Riker that he knows what he's planning and will not be surprised. But when he goes in, he just finds Troy, who surprises him by saying that she let herself in to feed Alexander's space beetle. And I like how she says the whole name of the beetle when she could just say beetle. Worf is going to know what she's talking about.
Hey, we've seen her recite an entire poem instead of just saying, check out this flower, so I was not surprised.
She gives Worf a gift and says she talked Riker out of giving him a surprise party.
Proving that Worf is not in his original reality and needs to get the hell out of there. So he picks up his space jump and launches himself back through the fissure. That's the Metroid thing. I'll put a picture up.
Oh, okay.
See, it's bookended. It all ties together. That's why people watch our videos.
When Troy's leaving, Worf stops her and asks her if she'd like to have dinner with him. And he surprises her, again, by asking the replicator to replicate champagne.
Parallels. Overall?
Most of this episode was just Worf tediously encountering change after change without any actual advancement of the plot. It seemed like the Array and the Cardassians were going to tie into things early in the episode, but they mostly seemed to be forgotten as the episode went on and was just another one of those background elements that was changing.
I thought the Array would also play some part in everything, but it didn't.
Yeah. Once we did find out what was happening, it amounted to a bunch of nonsense TNG stuff. At least the stuff with the other Enterprises toward the end I thought was interesting, and I actually liked what they did with Worf and Troy. The pairing doesn't seem like it would work on the surface, but I really hope that's something that comes up again later. But just like with Picard and Beverly a couple episodes ago, I doubt it's going to happen. If they had had something more interesting going on at the same time as all this that more directly involved Worf, instead of just having him explaining the same thing over and over again to everyone, they could have made that first half of the episode much more enjoyable. I liked a lot of the stuff toward the end, even if things didn't make sense, but I thought it took way too long to get there. I gave it a C+.
I also gave it a C+. I liked the steps Worf took. Once he was confused about what was happening, like immediately going to check the logs and whatnot, instead of standing around talking to himself, like Beverly did for all of Remember Me. But I also think it took a little too long for him to fully come to terms with what was happening and take some real action. He really lucked out in his reality shifts, having them all be pretty boring and safe. He could have shifted to one where everyone was a cartoon, or lizard people are constantly vomiting strawberry jelly, or speaking in Swiss cheese, or a reality that didn't have Geordi before he learned about the visor, because then he would have really been screwed. And I was under the impression before they said it that all of the Worfs would return to their proper universes at the end. But then Troy made that comment about her Worf not returning if they were successful. How would that work? At that point, I was asking, does that mean there's only one Worf in all of the infinite possible realities of the space-time continuum?
Especially since they said that the other Enterprises would probably go back to their own universes, why wouldn't the Worfs?
And what about while he was shifting? Would there be only one Worf at that time as well? But then, when they were contacted by the other Enterprise, there was the other Worf on the bridge. So would one Worf shifting bump all of the other Worfs around? Could there be 2 or more Worfs in one universe at the same time? Or what about the universes that never had a Worf to begin with?
I mean, in real life, it wouldn't make sense for this Worf to affect the other Worfs, because they're all separate Worfs. And when Worf is going through the fissure, we do see a bunch of Worfs in his shuttle as if the same thing happened to a bunch of them. But a bunch of them didn't go to the Batleth tournament, so I don't know.
And the Worf we stuck with was the only Worf who figured it out? What about a universe where Robot Worf shifted into a non-robot universe? Nobody would have said, hey, why are you a robot? And none of us are robots. And Worf is the only one, ostensibly in every universe, that remembers what happened? Or is it just this one Worf who remembers what happened? There have to be universes where others would take advantage of that fact and constantly be trying to reopen or discover similar quantum fissures. How did this thing form in the first place? Are there more of them? So many questions.
Yeah, I was wondering if this happened to this Worf, and it was affecting so many other realities, couldn't stuff be happening all the time that's just shifting realities all over the place?
When all of the Enterprises started appearing and the barriers between realities were breaking down, does that mean that the space surrounding those Enterprises was also merging? How would space handle being displaced by other space, and at a potentially infinite level? Is that a valid question?
Maybe. I mean, if the space is truly empty, then it should be okay.
But we're in Star Trek land, so there's 2D particles and subspace behind space.
I was wondering what would happen if one of the Enterprises was testing out that shield inside a star, and then part of the star now materialized in the middle of all these other Enterprises.
Yeah, that was my other question. In all of these universes, the Enterprises all encountered the quantum fissure. How does that work? What about the Enterprises that were docked, or on a planet, or in the middle of a sun? I actually have that in my note too. And the solution of let's just hit the giant undo button was comically simple, but very much expected at this point in the show. And I also found it amusing how everything was a guess, or a possibility, or a theory, and nothing was ever solidified as fact concerning the fissure, their actions, or the results of those actions. But by the end of the episode, they just carry on like it's any other day, with no further investigation. I also liked the fact that one of the Enterprises attacked Worf's shuttle at the end. It was a situation that felt more realistic in an episode of things that did not. And really, I thought there would have been a lot more ships that felt that way based on their individual situations. What about the reality where peanut butter doesn't exist? And yeah, the Worf-Troy relationship thing was compelling. The fact that it happened in an alternate reality gives it a little more credibility than what happened in Attached between Picard and Beverly, because in that situation, we were expected to believe that Picard and Beverly's intense romance had been simmering for the past 7 years, and I did not buy that. If Worf continues to pursue a relationship with Troy, I would be more willing to accept it, because the setup, while ridiculous, actually worked much better in this case.
I disagree. I still think the Picard and Beverly thing was fine.
I thought this was a fun episode, but didn't really hold any water in terms of logical storytelling. So, I'm gonna see if I can hop over to reality, where eggs aren't so f***ing expensive.
And I'll go try to find one where we have more subscribers.